Welcome to Legislative Advocacy 101, hosted by Texas Values. It's great to see so many folks jumping on. We'll get started in just a moment. Well, welcome to Legislative Advocacy 101, hosted by Texas Values. As we learn about some basic but very crucial things related to effective advocacy at the Texas Capitol. I'm Jonathan Covey. I'm the Director of Policy here at Texas Values, and co-hosting with me is Mary Elizabeth Castle, our Director of Government Relations. And just a housekeeping note before we get started, if you have a question you want to ask us about the process or about anything, in order for us to filter through those questions quickly, we would ask that if you have a question, you put it into the chat feature in the Zoom that you're on. You're not going to be able to chat right now, but towards the end of this presentation, we will activate your chat feature. We will not be taking questions verbally through the microphone, but we have staff on the back end that is making sure everything runs smoothly, and they will need to be able to read your question in the chat before we answer. So if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, and we'll try to get to them. But once again, if you have a question, we won't be taking it verbally through the microphone. Put it into the chat. All right. So I tried to say that up front. And having said that, we are incredibly excited to talk to you about advocating at the Texas Capitol. And the more so because we have an incredible event coming up for which you can use this training and for which this training and preparation will serve you well. And of course, the event I'm talking about is our Faith and Family Day at the Capitol, which we do every session, and we're talking about this every chance that we get because it truly is a chance to put your advocacy into action and to hear some some things about the legislative process, some incredible speakers. We'll hear from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick keynoting, and we have a fantastic lineup of conservative elected officials, as well as policy experts, including Riley Gaines, Dr. Eitan Haim, and so many others. And this is happening next week. This is going to be on March 6th. There's still time to sign up, but we already have so many registered, and we're looking to have an amazing time talking about issues like protecting women's privacy in sex-separated spaces, like talking about religious freedom, like so many other things. So you don't want to miss this event. You can go to our website at txvalues.org and sign up and register for it, and it comes with lunch, so great deal there as well. So don't miss this event. With that being said, Texas Values has been a leader in the legislative advocacy business since 2012, and between our policy team, we have over 30 years combined experience advocating, working in the legislature. And we've had some really high profile victories over the years, including the Merry Christmas Law in 2013, including the Texas Pastor Protection Act passed in 2015 session, and the Save Chick-fil-A Act, which, as you may remember, was a religious freedom law to protect anyone from government discrimination who donates to or affiliates with a religious organization. So very important bill there as well. More recently, we led the effort on the Texas Heartbeat Act, which was the first pro-life law of its kind with a private cause of action that was upheld by the Supreme Court, and the Save Women's Sports law in Texas, both the high school version and the college level version that keeps men out of women's sports, and preserves opportunities and fairness in women's athletics. So a lot of victories. And one thing that we find through all of our experience at the Capitol is this simple saying, and that is, government belongs to those who show up. And that's why at Texas Values, we are on the ground all 140 days of the Texas Legislature, and we're testifying in committee hearings. We're putting together press conferences to address the media on certain issues. So you have to be involved, and that's why this is our motto. As you can see from this next picture, that's the view of the Capitol from our office building. You can see how close we are to the Capitol building, literally across the street. And you have to be that close in order to be able to be involved enough to make a difference. So obviously we're very close to the Capitol, we're on the ground, and that's how we make a difference in the Texas legislative process. So let's talk about that a little bit, the process itself, because, obviously you have the Texas House and the Texas Senate, and the House of Representatives has 150 members, and the Senate has 31 members. And the origin of this isn't really known for sure why they did it, but it's generally believed that it was set up as a way to sort of reflect the chapters in Psalms and Proverbs, the number of chapters in each book in the Bible. But a bill has to pass through both the Senate and the House to become law. And at the very basic level, it has to go through both chambers, and then it has to be signed by the governor. And in order for a bill to become law, the very first official step is that a bill has to be filed. And lawmakers have been filing bills since November 12th of last year, which in general, lawmakers can continue filing bills, any bills during the first 60 calendar days of the legislative session. And after that point, only bills that are related to, for instance, like local matters, emergency items, and appropriations can be filed. Unless you have a suspension of rules, which is a 4/5 suspension. That gets into a little bit more complicated than we are for the basic terminology of this webinar. But while thousands of bills are filed, there were actually more than 8,000 bills filed in the last regular session. Only about 1,000 of those bills will pass. So this drives home the point that the legislative session is designed to kill legislation, not pass legislation. And at any given moment during the legislative process, a bill only has about a 12 to 15% chance of making it into law. So it's actually designed to slow down the flow of bills passing. And committees are the first major hurdle for a bill after it's being filed. Committees are basically smaller work groups that are formed by each chamber to focus on specific subject matter jurisdiction areas. This is mainly for time-saving purposes, because so many bills are filed during each session. And we go into a deeper discussion about committees. We'll hit a couple of things, but during our Legislative Advocacy 102, it gets a little more advanced into a discussion on committees. Most bills, they get referred to a committee. What this means is they just become assigned to a certain committee, and that committee has to review the bill. And by review, I mean that the committee will hold a public hearing on that bill. So the bottom line is, step one in advocacy is to lobby to get your bill scheduled for a public hearing. That's an important step, and the bill won't move forward without that. So Once a bill passes committee, it has to be scheduled for debate by the full chamber before it can continue advancing down the process. And after a debate on the bill, the majority of lawmakers, they have to approve the bill twice, not once, but twice, in order for it to pass. So while the Senate usually takes a vote on the same day on both approvals, the House normally doesn't. The House waits until the following day. So if your bill starts in the House and you get it worked through that entire process and then it's done, then it has to go to the Senate and the whole process repeats. It has to go through the entire process again. So, and further complicating this whole entire process are amendments and constitutional deadlines, because lawmakers have to meet certain deadlines to act on bills and to move them forward. And these deadlines are written in the Texas Constitution. And this means that one strategy to kill a certain bill is to draw out debate so long that it takes a long time to get to it, or to wait a few extra days before a bill gets scheduled for a floor debate. And then with amendments, a bill is constantly exposed to the danger of an unfriendly amendment, where someone tries to propose a change to a bill that either weakens the bill on the one hand, or it just entirely poisons the bill and the purpose of the bill. And we call those last ones, we call them poison pill amendments. So let's see. So that's kind of a summary of the legislative process and how it works. Just a couple of other notes about amendments. So we talked about committees and what they are. Committee substitute drafts these are versions of a bill. When the bill gets to committee and the author decides that they want to change something before it passes out of committee, they will lay out the original bill, they will explain the original bill, and then they will offer a committee substitute draft, which has a few changes in it, sometimes more than a few. And that will be the version that passes out of the committee. So it's an opportunity to edit, as it were, the bill before it moves on to the next stage. And then a committee report is just, if you hear that a bill was reported out of committee favorably, that means it passed the committee. If it was reported unfavorably, that means that it did not pass the committee. So committee reports are just the result of what the committee comes up with. So let's see what else we got. Plan your time. And this is pretty self-explanatory, but the legislature sort of operates on a time plan of its own. So you want to try to arrive early if you're going to come up to the Capitol to testify, for example, because it takes time to get in the parking garage and park. It takes time to walk up to the Capitol. It takes time to get through security, and then it takes time to register to testify, which Mary Elizabeth will talk about a little later. So 45 minutes to an hour is generally a pretty good estimate of getting there early if you're going for a committee hearing. Set your expectations. Don't expect to see everything happen right at once. The legislative process can be extremely fast, but also extremely slow. Our team just got done with a close to 15-hour day yesterday, a couple of different committees, but one of the committees went all day long, went for 8 or 9 hours or more. And so you have to set your expectations about how long you think things might take. Don't expect too much. And then pay attention to the timing of floor debates. This is very tricky, but it's very important because oftentimes a committee will start to meet, but then all of those members on that committee, they have to go into what's called a floor session or a floor debate. And that means they all gather together up in the main chamber. And when they do that, they have to stop the committee, and then the committee will start back after the floor debate is over. And so if you get somewhere if you get to a committee expecting it to start at one time, but the floor debate is starting at the same time, you know that the floor debate is going to override and the committee actually won't start until much later. So you have to pay attention to the timing of floor debates in the House and the Senate. Staying till the end of a committee can be very fruitful. Not everybody can do this, but if you can, sometimes you'll see your bill voted out of committee. And then be willing to sit in an office to wait for a legislator to return. Legislators are in and out of their offices, talking to other members, talking to constituents, and sometimes they're gone when you get to an office to visit with them. But they'll be a lot of times they'll come back, especially if they know that you're a constituent and that you want to visit with them. And at this point, I want to ask Mary Elizabeth to go over some aspects of testifying at public hearings, because this is one of the most important roles that you as an advocate can play in the legislative process. So, Mary Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. Many of you may have questions about how can you actually make your voice heard at the Texas Legislature. And one of the key ways is giving testimony whenever they have a public hearing. They call it the People's House, and so you have every right to be there to share your opinions on bills. It was said actually in a hearing that we had yesterday that when you go to US Congress, you actually have to be invited in order to testify. But here in Texas, anyone and everyone has the right to testify at the state capitol, but as long as you know what's going on. So there are a few steps that you need to take in order to register to testify, and a few tips to follow in order to make sure that it's a great experience for you and you can get your point across. So first thing you want to do is make sure that you arrive to the Capitol with enough time to get situated, but also enough time to also register for the committee. So we estimate about an hour to 45 minutes before the committee is set to start. You might want to even come a little bit earlier. Covey earlier mentioned places you can park for that day, but you want to make sure you're there early enough to sign up to testify, because they will make bills available pretty early so that people can register to testify on the kiosk. So to testify for a bill in the House, you'll go to the extension and there will be like a small square, kind of like an iPad electronic device that you'll push a button on, and you'll look for your committee and you'll look for the correct bill and you'll register in order to testify for or maybe even against a bill. In the Senate, it depends on the committee. So there are kiosks, these little small electronic iPad devices in the Senate as well. They'll be on the Senate side of what we say is the Senate side of the extension. But sometimes for Senate State Affairs, you'll actually sign up right outside the Senate chamber, because Senate State Affairs often meets in the Senate chamber. So they'll have kiosks outside there. And sometimes they have paper cards as well for Senate State Affairs. So that's the first step in making sure that you register for the right bill. You want to look for the right hearing. So look for the correct committee your bill's in. If it's an education bill, look for public education. Look for Senate Education Committee K through 16 in the Senate. And then be sure to know what bill number and the subject. That's how you'll be able to recognize that you're signing up for the correct bill. They'll ask for some information, name, address, just to make sure they know you're from Texas or where you're from. And then you want to make sure you register the correct position. And it's pretty simple as that. You register and then you wait. So next slide. So when it comes to structuring your testimony, there are a few parameters or a few, I would say delicacies that are important in order to have a structured testimony and to show respect to the committee as well. You do want to start off by agreeing, but also stating your position up front as well. Because if you don't state your name or position, they will ask you to repeat that information or to state that information before you get started. because they have to record that for the permanent record. So that's information that they have to have more so than any other, details or statistics that you have. They need to have on record your name and your position. So to structure a testimony, it's great to say Mr. or Miss Chair and do your research and know their name. That'll be great. And members of the committee, and you can also add what the name of the committee is. State your name. My name is, and I would say Mary Elizabeth Castle. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm testifying in favor of Senate or House bill and whatever number that is. That's the requirement for every beginning of every testimony that you need to give because, like I said, they need to have this information on the record and it very clearly states why you're there. Then you can insert comments afterwards. I think some good ideas for comments could be a personal story that you have in relation to the bill. Those are very effective, especially as a constituent. Sometimes it's great to have a few facts and maybe a quote or some research that you've done. Maybe you've seen something in the news related to an issue. Mention that as well to show you're paying attention. Um, if it helps, you can also do bullet points, say like first point, secondly, third, and last. But you want to make sure that you do have a structure to your testimony. And sometimes it's great to have notes with you so you can know where it's going because now we're seeing a lot of committees are only giving you about 2 minutes. And in a very busy committee hearing, sometimes they'll even shorten that to 1 minute if they're going very long. So you want to make sure you have down what you want to say because there may be an instance where you don't have much time to figure out as you're going what you would like to say. And then you would end with the conclusion and ask that they would pass that bill. So I'd respectfully ask that you vote for or against the Senate bill or the House bill, which is very important to reiterate your position on that piece of legislation. So it's very clear why you're there. Next slide. So know your research and be very competent in the issue that you're speaking about. Have timely, up-to-date research on your issue. Like I mentioned, you can use something that maybe you saw on the news or read on a news site. We, as a team, will always try to make sure that we're creating one-pagers or videos or something that you can use in order to use in your testimony that shows that you know what you're talking about when you come to the committee. Know who is on the committee and already supports your bill. That's very important. And don't make assumptions because sometimes you may think, oh, they're this affiliation or that affiliation. Of course, they should be against this, or of course, they should be for this. But it's great to have some extra information to know if maybe they're in the middle of the road, or maybe there's someone who needs a little more influence. And it's also great to know if you're climbing an uphill battle. If you're on a committee where it's very close, then you might need to be a little more persuasive. If you're on a committee where you know everyone believes this issue, they agree with your side, then maybe your testimony is more about encouragement and support. So it's always great to know who's on the committee and where they stand on that bill. Watch for softballs. Sometimes members will see a constituent they recognize, or maybe they don't recognize them, but they'll ask a question in order to help them further their point. We saw this a little yesterday too, as well. If there was a parent who talked about a certain issue, but maybe that parent ran out of time in order to further explain an issue, then a legislator would ask a question so that person could talk further. So, don't be too intimidated by the process that you don't recognize whenever they're trying to help you out and give you more time to explain an issue. Know who is hostile to the bill as well. So, don't just count the votes, but count the opposition as well. And maybe know a little bit about where they're from, their personalities, because, it can also help you in your testimony too, to know how to address or speak them or influence them as well. Bring others with you, especially those with a personal stake in the outcome. One perfect example of this was the Save Women's Sports issue, making sure that we had as many female athletes at the Capitol as possible. Sometimes we even had maybe a parent testify, but they wanted to bring their daughter, who was an athlete with them. And we'll have opportunities for bills like that this session as well, where you can bring someone who does have a personal stake in a particular issue. Maybe for the Med Act, you bring someone who works in the medical field. For the privacy issue, bringing just any woman or young girl who maybe has experienced or could possibly experience a violation of privacy. Those are examples of bringing others who have a personal stake in the outcome. And you should believe that people on all perspectives and sides of the issue are doing that already. So it's very important. All right, next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Elizabeth. That is, and as you're doing research, there's a number of really great tools out there. Texas Legislature Online is a really, really excellent tool, a great research tool that a lot of people use. And what this is this is the Texas Legislature's official public-facing tool for bill research. You can look up bills, find out about their history, which committees they've been to, what the vote is. You can even find simple explanations of what the bill does. It's called a bill analysis. So, and then further from that, you can also set up lists of bills to track for free. And you can have the site set up email alerts on those bills, text alerts. So this is a very highly helpful site I would say, used by most, if not all, of the lobbyists and advocates at the Capitol. So go into that, capitol.texas.gov. That's we call it TLO, or Texas Legislature Online. Great research tool for you to start looking at right now. And then let's see, babies and children. So the bottom line is legislators love kids. So even though in some ways it could be a hassle or hard to bring kids up to the Capitol, you will be more effective if you bring them, and they love to see them. Spend the day up there, either before or after your testimony. You can visit with offices, and you'll get more access that way. Also, target the fence sitters. So if you know that your representative or your senator is sort of in the middle on a certain issue or hasn't completely made up their mind, those are people to target. Those are people to talk to, because your opinions really will matter in a much more multiplied way to those people. And then I guess we covered that. Children receive a lot of attention. Legislators love to take pictures. They love to see kids participating in the process and being up at their Capitol. So it's a very effective thing. And kids, it's actually a great learning experience for kids too, because they come up to the Capitol and they get to see how the entire process happens, and really that there's a lot of respect that goes on day to day amongst legislators and staff and the process. So, and then finally, and this is something that I can speak to in a personal way because I used to be a staffer, but respect the staff and follow up. Staffers are the eyes of the legislators. They are the ears of the legislators. And a lot of times, if a legislator is dealing with 10 or 15 different issues, they have to delegate those issues out to staff. They can't cover everything themselves. So in a very real way, a staffer will be the most direct person you can talk to about a particular issue. I would recommend trying to set up meetings with legislators beforehand. If you can call your state representative, and the reason we say yours is because they're very responsive to constituents, very responsive to the people they represent. But also, you could call other offices and set up meetings with them as well. And if you're able to do that before you come up, you will maximize the amount of time you get to sit down with folks. You'll maximize the amount of effectiveness that all of your talking points make. And then always be willing to sit down with with a staffer, even if the legislator is not available. Sometimes this happens a lot. A lot of times this might happen because the legislator is in and out, and it's a busy day, and they just aren't able to take time sometimes. And then finally, if you talk about a specific issue or a subject, follow up if you promise them any type of information. Bring a one pager with you if you can. Bring some sort of one-page document describing your issue, and then follow up. And if they ask for more information, give them more information. Get their email addresses. Grab a business card and shoot them an email that very same day after you finish with all of your meetings. So very effective things to do, and you will be much better as an advocate at the Capitol if you're able to take some of these suggestions and roll them into your advocacy efforts. So that is the discussion. That's the end of our discussion purely on the advocacy topics. But we did want to give you just a quick rundown of a couple of legislative priorities that Texas Values is focusing on this session. And of course, we work on different things, different priorities each session, but for the 89th legislature. So to start off, Mary Elizabeth, talk about a little bit about our top priority for the organization this session.
Yes, the top priority for Texas Values this session is finally making sure that we can protect women and girls in their private spaces. You may remember, and were following us back in 2017, where there was an attempt to pass the Texas Privacy Act, and that was to protect women in the restroom. Well, that law did not pass, and since then, the issue has spread to so many different areas, not just the restroom. You may have seen in the news how Planet Fitness has gender neutral locker rooms. You have heard the story from Riley Gaines, how she also had to share a locker room with male Leah Will Thomas. So this is an issue that's become a problem and has become expansive, and we want to have legislation to finally solve it and protect women in Texas. You saw even in the fall how Odessa City Council adopted their own policy to protect women, but we want to make sure that it's statewide. So, like I said, this legislation is necessary because sadly, so many women and girls across the state are being forced to use their private spaces, even when it comes to jails and when it comes to domestic abuse shelters. But the research is on our side. So back in 2017, you had some, resistance or arguments against it, but 91% of people polled believe that public spaces should include separate toilets for men and women. So the research is definitely on our side and people are on our side. So we feel very confident about having this legislation passed. It's HB 239 by Representative Valerie Swanson and SB 240 by Senator Mays Middleton. This legislation would clarify that you have to separate these spaces based on biological sex. It creates civil penalties for noncompliance and also gives the Texas Attorney General power to investigate a violation. So we're very excited about this legislation, and we'll be giving you more updates soon.
Thank you. And yeah, and then another priority piece that we're working on is a religious freedom piece for the 89th legislature. So HB 2816, we worked with Representative Oliverson to file medical conscience protections. And, you ask, what is that? Well, medical conscience protections are simply the ability of healthcare professionals to be able to decline to do certain procedures and treatments that go against their religious freedom, go against their conscience. And we believe that every Texan should have the freedom to operate according to their ethical beliefs, according to their religious beliefs. A couple of stats here. 1 in 5 medical students, they say that they have chosen not to practice in a certain field because of hostility toward their beliefs in that area of practice. And most of the time, these students here were on track to become pro-life OBGYNs or other doctors who would have been able to provide a lot of critical care for women and their unborn babies. So it's a very crucial thing. that we protect medical students. And then finally, 9 out of 10 religious doctors and other medical professionals say they would rather not practice at all rather than violate their oath to do no harm. And this is because they have principles, they have convictions. So we worked to put this bill together to define conscience in health and safety code, and to protect not only nurses and doctors, but also healthcare institutions where they work from being mandated to participate in specific procedures. Now, in Texas, we have a couple protections. We have a protection for doctors against having to perform abortions, but we don't have anything against them having to perform gender transition surgeries or treatments, puberty blockers, as well as sterilization procedures, contraceptives, things like that. And this is sort of a belt and suspenders approach and a blanket approach to make sure that healthcare professionals are protected and they don't have to go against their conscience. We're actually one of only about 15 states who still have not passed this type of protection. And oftentimes you'll see doctors or medical professionals facing losing their licenses or losing their jobs, and being faced with criminal charges over exercising their rights of conscience. And this is not right. Religious freedom is the first right in the First Amendment to the Constitution. And we believe that this is going to be a very helpful bill. You may remember to the situation with Dr. Eitan Haim, who was the doctor who was the whistleblower at Texas Children's Hospital, and he faced a lot of feedback and pushback from the DOJ and other places, even his own work, for whistleblowing and not practicing on these gender transition surgeries. So very important bill to get passed. And we're excited to be working with Dr. Oliverson, who's a very capable author on this issue as well. So that's sort of our update on a couple of our legislative priorities. I do want to check with our staff on the back end and see if we have any questions that are being put into the chat right now. And if we haven't opened that up, let's go ahead and open up the chat for questions and see if we have any questions for folks to answer before we get off. We allotted about 40 minutes for the presentation portion of this webinar, and so we're right at that right now. So Ashley, can you tell us if we have any questions? We're checking right now.
No, sir, not right now.
Okay, well, we'll hold it open for just a second longer, see if anyone has any questions on the legislative process. Don't forget that our Texas Faith and Family Day is March 6th. That's coming up quick. That's this next Thursday. And we will be hearing from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. We showed a slide earlier. We'll be hearing from a number of really exciting speakers, including Dr. Haim, who will be showing up by live video. And we'll be at the Texas Public Policy Foundation building to hear those speakers. And then towards noon, after we have lunch, we'll be walking with folks over to the Texas Capitol, which is just a block or so away. And we'll go and visit offices, and we'll get to talk with legislators about issues that matter on faith, family, and freedom, especially Women's Privacy Act and the medical conscience protections, opt-in for sex ed, things that really matter for pro-family issues. So we have any other questions before we end?
No questions are in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us on Texas Legislative Advocacy 101, hosted by your Texas Values Policy Team. Remember, government belongs to those who show up, and here at the Capitol and in Austin, we're dedicated to being your boots on the ground and showing up all 140 days of session. We hope to see you on March 6th at Texas Faith and Family Day. And until then, thank you and have a great day. Thanks, guys.